Welcome to the first of 3 videos about the first part of the Phaedo, and in particular the recollection argument as it's treated in the Phaedo. In class we talked about the recollection argument as it appears in the Meno, and we discussed how the recollection argument there provides a bit of a response to Meno's paradox. And what we'll be doing in this series of videos is talking about how the introduction of the forms, which don't appear in the Meno, can give us a better account of the 2 kinds of knowledge in question, and so deepen our response to the paradox of inquiry, or Meno's paradox. So when we were discussing the Meno, I introduced this exciting idea that's going to be sort of the core idea of the class that we're going to see different philosophers disagree about. And the exciting idea is that we have abilities that go far beyond what we can learn from experience or take in through the senses. And so what we saw in the Meno is that, yeah, Socrates asks leading questions to the boy, but the boy has to affirm or deny on his own. And in order to be able to do that, he has to already have an idea of what an area 8 square is going to look like. He already has to have an idea of what he's trying to construct before he starts trying to construct it. And then he has to be able to compare what he's constructed to that idea he has of the 8 area square and see whether it matches or not. And so here we're going to develop that even more through this idea of the forms. In the Phaedo, it gets developed the idea of the forms. So the forms aren't explicitly discussed in the Meno. And you might wonder, well, why not? Why doesn't Plato introduce the forms in the Meno? Well, Meno and Socrates don't appear to be friends in the dialogue. So Meno gives speeches about virtue, but he's not sort of one of Socrates' inner circle. They don't have discussions, regularly. They're not really friends. And in the Phaedo, all of the people in the dialogue are very close friends of Socrates. So he's having a conversation with his sort of inner circle of friends around his deathbed. And there's some thought that because he's among friends, he's more forthcoming about this idea of the forms, or he's more forthcoming about the need for this perfect idea against which we measure instances in order to make judgments at all. So what are the forms? Well, examples of the forms that come up in Plato's dialogue include the just, the equal, the beautiful itself. And the Greek word that's getting translated as form is this Greek word eidos. And eidos, you can sort of hear, is cognate with our word idea. And so eidos, throughout the 2,500 years after Plato, gets translated both as form and as idea. So these are sort of cognate words. They don't sound similar, but they're actually cognate words, form and idea. And the word eidos in Homer's time, so Homer was a few generations before Plato, and back in Homer's day, eidos just meant the visible shape of something. So in the Iliad, the epic poem by Homer, he'll talk about Helen's pleasing eidos, her visible shape, right? Her form, the shape that she has. And by the time we get to Plato's time, eidos comes to mean something more like the character of things. So it's not just its visible shape, it's not just this specific kind of character, but it's any character that it has, the color that it has, the sound that it makes, the way that it feels, etc. Right? So any kind of character that a thing has, any kind of features that it has, any kind of properties that it has, will be part of its eidos. And now in Plato's hands, it's going to become something further still, something, it's going to develop again. And it's going to develop into these perfect ideas of things that sort of exist outside of the sensible world. Aristotle, so much later than Plato, at Metaphysics 1:6, says that Plato separates the forms, whereas Socrates does not. What does he mean by that? What does he mean by that? Well, we're not going to worry too much about the distinction between Plato and Socrates, but just for a second, the thought is, well, Socrates in the Euthyphro, for example, that's a sort of classic example of Socrates' views, and there he's just looking for the character, the nature, right? The nature of the pious, or to put it in slightly different terms, right? We saw him asking the question, you know, what is it? What is the pious? And so when you can answer the question, what is it, for Socrates or Plato, well, then you're giving the nature of the thing, and you're indicating a form of it. Okay, so the difference between Plato and Socrates, I mean, what Aristotle is getting at in this passage is that Plato thinks the forms are real existing things that exist outside of the sensible world. So the beautiful, the equal, the just, they're real things that we come to know before we're born. Whereas Socrates just thinks the form of a thing is the thing, is its nature. It doesn't have a sort of, its nature doesn't have a separate existence on its own. Rather, it's just what it is, what the thing is. It answers the question, what is F? Right? What is beauty? What is justice? What is piety? Right? We looked at that question last time. And so the main thought that we're going to see developed in the Plato, in the Phaedo, so the Phaedo is more representative of Plato's views, whereas the Euthyphro is more indicative of Socrates' views. And the main thought that we're going to see developed in the Phaedo is that the abilities we display in our everyday judgments, especially judgments of comparison, are going to involve applying a standard, the F itself, the beautiful, the just, the equal, as a standard by which we measure particular instances, like 2 equal sticks, or this or that person. And we decide whether they're just or unjust, or equal or unequal, right? So the forms act as a kind of standard. Now, what's the aim of the recollection argument? What's the aim of the recollection argument? How do we, let's see, I need to, oh, whoa, sorry about that. Craziness. All right. Okay, never mind. I won't move that. Okay, what's the aim of the recollection argument? Well, think about the aims of the dialogue as a whole. Well, what's it trying to do? What's Plato trying to do in the dialogue? If you said he's trying to give an argument for the immortality of the soul, you would be right. And so how does the recollection argument fit into the overall aim of the dialogue, this argument for the immortality of the soul? Well, it sets out to prove half of what Plato thinks he needs to prove. It sets out to prove that the soul pre-exists the body. But notice it doesn't do everything that needs to be done. It doesn't show that the body lives on after. It doesn't show that the soul lives on after the body dies, right? So it's only going to be sort of the beginning of making this argument that the soul is immortal. Now, okay, let's talk for a second about, well, let's, I'm going to end this video earlier than I thought. So there are actually going to be 4 videos on the Phaedo, part 1. I'm going to end this video now, then we'll talk about the recollection argument. Okay, so we'll talk through the recollection argument in the next video.